Hi everyone. In this video we're going to be going over a Grasshopper script that allows you to create a space frame with outer panels. So let me show you what it takes to get that done. Okay, to start we're going to create the base geometry, and we're going to do something different today. We're going to create a arc, and so we're going to need an YZ plane. And as you can see, it'll create kind of a plane that's upright to the side. And so now we can create that arc, and as you can see, that arc is originally on the bottom plane, and we want it to be aligned with that, so we put that plane right up to that one, and now we can create a slider to increase the size of that arc. So that is our base geometry here. So now that we have this, we want to create another arc that has a different radius. So we also want this radius to be on that plane, and so we have created another circle. And so what we want to do is keep that circle there, and then this one we want to move it in the XY direction. So let's move that new arc, which is this one, in this direction. So we want to move it, but default is going to go up. So as you can see, it'll move it up, but we want to move it in this same direction, perpendicular to that direction. So we could just plug that in there, and as you can see, it defaults to 1. But a trick to be able to create a slider when you want to move that is you go to amplitude, and plug that plane into the amplitude. Plug this into there, and now if you create a slider, you'll be able to move. Actually create a new slider of 120. So now that we plug that into the amplitude, you'll see that we actually moved it in another direction. So that's really interesting, and we can go ahead and hide this one. We have the original, we have the new one, and we want to create one more at the end. Alright, so we have these two, and we want to create this same arc. We want to create it right on the other side. So one way to do that would be to mirror. And to mirror something, all you need is a plane, a mirror plane. And so that's what it's asking here, the mirror plane. So we want to take this curve, and you don't necessarily need a plane. You need an object like this one. This arc is sitting on a specific plane, and so it'll take that geometry in that plane, and it'll actually use that plane to mirror that curve. So we don't have to add any other steps. We just go ahead and have 1, 2, and 3. And as you can see here, if we increase the size of the first and the last one, it'll increase accordingly, and same with this middle one. And so we can also increase the amplitude here, how wide it's going to be, how big it's going to be, and this is going to be our base geometry. Let's go ahead and loft together these 3 curves. So let's start with the first one. Let's continue with the second one, holding shift down, and when you hold shift down, you'll see that plus sign, and that's how you know that you're adding it. Otherwise it won't work. So if you go just like that and you want to add this one, it'll override it. So you have to do it in order. First one, middle one, and then the last one. And we can hide that initial geometry because this loft is what allows us to see the entire geometry. So let's increase middle size, let's decrease it, let's play around with some of the geometry. So that's a fun little form that we created with these 3 arcs. To create a space frame around this, we're gonna have to subdivide this surface a certain amount of times. So to do that, we go to Isotrim, and this is something that I tend to do when I need to subdivide a surface and create a space frame around it. So you'll see that when you insert that surface into the component, you'll get nothing. You'll need to add another component that works with this one, which is divide domain square. This, you need to plug in that same surface that you plugged into there, you plug into here. And now this is going to default to 10, so you'll see here 10. Let's create a slider of 4, that way we have a smaller subdivision and not make a heavy trimmed surface. So we'll keep it simple. So as you can see, we've created 4 divisions this way and 4 divisions that way. You can go ahead and hide this original loft, and we've successfully created that trimmed surface for an interesting form that can be adjusted. Okay, we have this iso-trimmed surface, and what we want to do is create another identical one that is offset in a certain amount. So to do that, we'll go ahead and offset not this iso-trimmed surface, but let's do it for this surface. And let's give it a distance of 12. And let's make it a max of 36, so that way, so you can see, we have that surface on the inside, and it only offsets in. So we have that, and we also have this isotrim surface. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and hide this one, unpreview it, and we're gonna copy this component, and we're gonna plug that surface into it, unplugging the surface. So I drag and hit Alt to create a copy, and then you have this surface, and so instead of this lofted surface going into it, we're gonna have this lofted surface that was offset 36 inches, and we're gonna have plug that right into that surface. And so we've successfully created these 2 identical iso-trimmed surfaces that we can now either create a space frame. We could do many things at this point, but for today's exercise, I'm going to create a space frame that goes from this point to that point, and from there to the center, and create an X. So there's going to be a few steps, but I feel like the result at the end is going to be very much worth it. Okay, I'm going to deconstruct the B-rep 2 times because I want 2 sets of vertices that we can put together. So let me show you what I mean by that. Plug that in there and plug this in here, and you'll get a brand new copy of both of those surfaces. That's great because now we have these points, these outer points, and we have those outer points. So as you can see, these are vertices, these are edges, which are the lines on the outside, and these are the faces, which are the actual faces. I'm gonna hide them for now because I need to show you when you create a polyline. I want it to show up as soon as I plug it in, or not even a polyline. Oh, I take that back, a polyline, because we need to create the outside geometry first. These are all the points, so let me show you what it does. It actually creates a box around those 4 points, but it won't complete it unless you set the boolean to true. Here, set the boolean to true, which will allow you to create those perfectly closed surfaces or curves, and they're planar curves if I'm not mistaken. So let me copy and paste here and do the same thing for the bottom one. So there we go, we created a space frame on the inside and on the outside. From here, we want to create the connection between this point and that point, which is a straight line between, let me type in points here to show you how these vertices are actually those points, and these vertices are actually these points on the outside. So we're going to create a line from here to there with a simple line command, which is why I got confused last time, because this is to close that polyline and this is to connect from this bottom one to this top one. So let's go from A to B, from A, this vertices, and then B. And there we go. We have those boxes basically. And we can easily increase or decrease the number of divisions. That way we can develop this if we need to. So to create that point in the middle that we're going to connect to, there's going to be a few steps, but they're pretty straightforward and shouldn't be too tricky. So let's get on those. Let's offset that same loft. So we're creating that same surface, but we're doing it half of this distance, which is 36 we have right now. So let's divide, and then we'll add a 2 here. That way we don't have to create a slider, and then we'll go that distance halfway. So we've created that half distance there, and we'll isotrim. So I'll move that over, hit Alt, and then I'll put in that same surface there. So as you can see, we have, let's unpreview this and let's preview this. We have that isotrimmed surface there, and so we need to get the midpoint between those. So let's do that quickly. It's the same steps that we did before. Let's deconstruct the VREP to get the vertices, which are the points at the end, and let's create a polyline that is boolean to true. Sorry, it's a little bit off screen. You want to set that to true, and we put these vertices here, creating those polylines that are in the center. And from here we create a center point in that polygon. So we found that polygon center. Perfect. We can hide that. Now we have that point in the middle, and we have these points in the back, and then these points in the front. So these points on the outside are going to go all to one point, and all these points on the back are all going to go to one point for an X space frame. So I'm going to delete these so we don't have redundant points, and let's go ahead and create a line from point A to point B. So the point A is going to be here, and the point B is going to be that center point. So we have that X, and we're going to do the same thing for the other one. We have that center point, but we're going to go from these vertices. So there we have a space frame that goes to an X in the middle. Now if we increase the thickness, it'll give you a different result, but as you can see, we've successfully created that geometry. And so we can play around with this, increase or decrease the size. And so let's change the divisions here. So we have these curves and these curves. I'm going to change the count numbers so we can adjust the panels that go this way. But let's decrease some of the sizes here. That way we can have a little bit more control on these. We'll make it a little bit of a longer structure. So I have these sets of lines here, which I want to be thicker than the ones on the inside, which are going to be these. And so we're going to create a pipe, but instead of creating two different radiuses, we're going to go ahead and just do a radius of 1.5 here. And let's plug in all of these, using shift to add additional lines here. And so we have those thick wires, those thick wireframe here, and that's what we want. We want the inside ones to be a little bit thinner than the outside ones. So we'll do a division, divide, and we'll actually divide by, let's divide by 2. So let's do this. Let's do a slider of 2. We'll do a minimum of 2 here and a maximum of 3. That way we have a range of numbers and we can adjust the proportions. So we have 1.5, we're dividing that by 2, which will give us 0.75, and that'll allow us to drag this over, hit Alt. Oh, it's going to copy all of those. But what we want is let me bring that back. What we want is these lines instead of those. Oops, apologize for that mess up. And so if we use the same radius, it'll look uniform. And if we bring in this radius here, we'll see that we'll actually thinner on the inside and thicker on the outside. Okay, so on that last one it got a little heavy, but let's do a 2 inch radius pipes, and let's watch it change here. And so as you can see, we've created that space frame. Okay, let's create the exterior shell, and to do that we're gonna have to account for the thickness of that pipe. So let's offset that initial surface, which is this. We're going to offset it out a negative amount, because if we just plug in this 2 radius here, it'll offset it in, and we actually want to offset it out. So we'll do the opposite by putting a negative there. And this surface, we're going to have to do something similar that we did to the others. So we're going to have to isotrim it. And then divide domain square. So we plug that in here, we plug this in here, and it'll give us the default. They're not lining up, so we're gonna have to take those initial 7 and 5 that are there, plug them back into here. And so we have, we have that outside face, but we do have it bowing out a little bit. So to make sure that we're doing it right on top, we're gonna deconstruct the B-rep, which is gonna give us a bunch of, once again, a bunch of vertices, a bunch of faces, and a bunch of edges. So we're gonna create a polyline. So let's hide this again. We're gonna create a polyline that's closed. So I'm putting it to true here. It's a little bit off screen there, but once we plug in these curves, we have that rectangle sitting right on top of that pipe. which is exactly what we wanted. And from here we can go ahead and create a planar or a boundary surfaces. So let's do boundary surfaces, plug it in here, and there we have the structure with the outer shell. That I'm going to bake it real quick just to see what we got. And that is about what we wanted. We wanted it to be right on top, and that's what we got here. But we do want to give this a little bit of a thickness. So let's see if we were able to do that by lofting it and putting them together. So let me give you an idea of how we're going to create the thickness on the outside. We can go ahead and hide the structure, and as we can see we have two panels. We have that initial, we have this surface on the outside. We do have some curves popping up here, so let me hide those. We have that, and we want to create something similar, give it a thickness, and loft it together. So let's see if we can do that fairly quickly. Let's offset in the negative direction because we know that that is the way that we offset out. And let's plug in that surface, and let's give it a thickness of 4 inches. And let's do the same command that we did here. So let me move that over, and let me plug in this surface here, and let me plug in that surface there. So we should have this isotrim surface here, and we also have that offset surface that we had before. So let's copy this over since it's something similar that we want to do, and let's plug in those. So we basically created one surface on the outside, one surface on the inside. So we should be able to loft these together if we go one here and plug this other one here. And so we have that thickness, we have the inside and the outside one. So let's see if we can join them together and hide these. See how many 35 closed joined B reps. So let's see, 35, is that right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times 5, 35. That's perfect. So we have that closed outside shell, and we have this inside space frame that we can, let's say, change the thickness from 36, let's change it to 12. Change that to 12. Let's see how that does. And let's change the pipe radius from 2 to 1. And so we have the space frame here with the outside. So let's go ahead and group them together. So we'll group this set of pipes with that set of pipes, and we'll group together this set of B reps. So in the end we could hide everything else and just have these two remaining groups. Now that I have the groups, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here and see what we've done here, and let's mess around with the initial radius here. Let's go here to 200, let's 279, let's go 400. And yes, this will be heavy because you're creating pipes, and you're also creating a thickness here to the outside, so it will have a little bit of an issue trying to update quickly. So I will make sure to clean this up later when you go online, and when you check this out and you check out the links, this should be all cleaned up. So let me go here. We got that group, this group, and I'm going to bake it together. Actually, before that, let's make sure we flatten here, because that'll ensure that they are grouped. So let's do that again. Let's bake this here, and now let's hide that, and now we have that space frame here that I feel looks pretty interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and do a quick render just to see what we got. Okay, so this is what it gave us as a result for our render, and I feel like it looks pretty good. The only thing is that material on the outside, it looks so transparent that it looks like there are no panels on the outside. But if you zoom in, you'll see that there's a thickness on the outside of that structure. So I hope you learned something from this tutorial. Let me know if you have any questions. I will make sure to add the script and everything for you to download. I will be back soon with another tutorial. Thank you very much for watching.